and Scott. These are in no particular order. And Curieso Tenorio Brito. Yes. David Robert Erb is not here, so Michael E. Owens. And Donald P. Owens II. A little bit of ceremony here, so hopefully you can say, I was there that first time when they got into trouble, when they said those things. Peter J. Light. And last but not least, John Mason Hodges. And John Hodges gets a Bach Lectures one as well. So he's collecting the whole set, you know.
Collector set.
All right. Let me put this here. We had needed a battery change. What I'd like us to do in this session, if we can, is, and I know the stream is probably like, where did he go? Okay. You mean just for the audience or for them? Sorry, that'll work. That's ugly. Let's all get out. We just had a talk on aesthetics. Yeah, tacky in the wrong sense. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yes, it's evangelical and functional. Yes. Okay. Alrighty. I'd like to have you maybe each comment in a similar way that Scott did to kind of get things going, and then you guys jump in with questions. But I'd like you to, if you could, put you on the spot, have you highlight maybe something, some of you already did this in your talks, that you heard from someone else that you want to hear more of, or ask each other, and then you guys can jump in there. So I'm going to step out, but I will ask you just to, if you can, stand up here, or stand up and project. Especially you, so. Scott, since you led us so eloquently in the last session, if you'd start us off down there with something else.
I have to go first.
Yeah.
So ask someone else something.
Yes, if you want to, or something that you appreciated someone else said, maybe.
Ready. And immediately she's like, okay, we're doing men's ensemble. She started teaching all the men. Okay.
After an hour, your brain shuts off. And maybe let someone else go first.
Yeah. Anybody else want to take that?
Okay, yeah. I have some low-hanging fruit, actually. I think it was Michael who was talking about the importance of rote learning and even how we can use that as a tool. I'm really interested in that, particularly. Yeah, no. Especially as a music educator, and I was thinking about when we were reading yesterday that one piece of mine that was the Mission Impossible meter or whatever it is, the 6/8 plus the 2/4, and it's almost impossible to look at it, but then once you hear it, instantly you go, oh yeah, it feels like that. And who was talking about lead sheets looking so complicated? Was it?
That was me.
Yeah, and they look so complicated, but then you can feel the rhythm inherently. So what I think is a worthwhile, wish someone would do a talk on it, is how practically speaking, maybe you could say that's actually really simple, just put out recordings, but I just think that's a really powerful tool to be explored in conjunction with music literacy, utilizing the power of, hey, it sounds like this. Is so helpful. If you also have literacy and you also have the printed music for preservation and for retention. So anyways, that's my salvo.
That's great. Well, I was going to say, I don't think that was me because I don't know the word rote. I don't even know what rote learning is, showing my ignorance here. But I know what you're describing. And it was the only thing available to me was my own voice. I would have done something else if I'd had it. I would have had someone else do it if there was anything else available. My brother wanted to teach Psalms to his church, metrical Psalms, and so I pulled a bunch that I liked, made recordings of them, gave them CDs, and as far as I remember the story, passed out 2 CDs to every member of the congregation, and a year later they learned 85 tunes. But they learned it by listening. I don't think, did you have psalm singing? Where you learned, practice tunes?
We did. We had a meal every week, so there was usually singing involved with that. We had a monthly psalm sing at one of the elders' houses. And, you can complain about the quality of the singing all you want, but everybody listened to it for pleasure all the time. So it just became part of the language, the artistic, aesthetic language of the church.
What I would like to hear from everyone else with more experience, wider experience than I is how do you make that happen? How do you get somebody else to listen to and come to enjoy something which they need to listen to learn?
Yeah, I mean, we put out recordings of our service. We have a pretty good broadcast deal. And so someone's in a separate room mixing, and we put in a lot of room mics, so you hear the congregation singing. So it's a little messy, but the predominant sound is this kind of a tsunami of voices. And it's interesting to see even how the tastes of our people get cultivated in that direction. They end up just loving to hear that. And then we just stick it on SoundCloud, the free stuff. We don't mess around with copyright stuff, but put it on SoundCloud, and people just listen to it. And such an opportunity technologically, I think, right now.
I guess I would say that, for me at least, listening would take a backseat to participation and having lots of opportunities for people to sing together. So that it's not that they're listening to recorded music, but they may have to listen to get in the swing of a particular hymn. But, Yuri's done that at his church. We did that in Moscow with the churches having monthly psalm sings that were very well attended because it was hugely fun to sing along.
Well, that's a good point, and that reminds me, I also always put the next week's liturgy in the bulletin and online with links to all the music. So the families were also studying and singing together all week, so they were ready for Sunday. It was a very small congregation. If they hadn't been ready, I would have been the only one singing.
And I think the general lesson out of all of this here is that this is doable.
Yes.
It can be done. It has been done in congregations all over, the South that don't treasure much in my community this kind of congregational singing. It can be done, and I think pastors need to be creative of how that's applied to their congregations and take opportunities. Every Baptist has a potluck meal. There are opportunities to begin, to end, to inject music in virtually everything that the community does throughout the week. And I think many churches in my community are just satisfied with the repertoire of the top 20, and they keep repeating. I've told this story before in a few podcasts of the congregation I attended when I was in college, where the music leader would arise to the pulpit, and he would be literally for 2 minutes looking for the next song to sing, to introduce, and we would just hear him flipping pages until he chose one, inspired by the Spirit, I presume, until he chose what was more doable. And so the intentionality has been lacking in music because it has become a secondary enterprise of the church. And so it's up to pastors to say, no, this is what we do. This is part of our DNA, and we can't put this aside as something we do only sporadically.
It requires life together.
It does.
It requires more than just a Sunday morning service. It
I agree.
requires
Yeah.
living together, having these opportunities around the table, and singing together.
Yeah. Very good.
How do you teach parts? What strategies have you guys found, anybody, for teaching parts to a congregation that, I know a guy who has a congregation who loves to sing, and they sing in unison. And the few times where we have managed to do some parts, it just blows their minds, almost so much that I think maybe we shouldn't do this. But it's amazing. But yet, no, we don't have a culture of it. And maybe it's nothing profound, but I'd just be curious to hear how other people have brought congregations from unison.
I think that if there is no culture of singing in parts, then you sing in unison. And until you provide a new generation of students who are equipped to sing in parts, and then, when that moment comes, you can begin to introduce it. But in the meanwhile, it would be quite a task if the culture itself is not producing these kinds of people. So it would be, in many ways, it's a pretty frightening enterprise for any congregation. I mean, there are visitors who have been literally frightened by the 30 minutes that it took to teach the parts to Psalm 98, you know? And so if we have a couple of examples in the church of people who can sing parts, they can be used as solitary examples. Okay, your altos over here. This is what we do in our psalm roars. We split everybody. The latter 5 songs, what we do is we split the church into 4. We separate the sections, and it's really beautiful. But we have a lot of musically literate people in the congregation. It makes it easier. So in the meanwhile, if you don't, start with very small, have one representative go here, one over there. And I think that begins at least set the mood, but you have to build a culture before that becomes something normative in the church.
And that culture is built, again, to reiterate what Peter said, by having a community. Culture is not an individual, it's not an individual phenomenon, it's a community phenomenon. And as I look to the cultures that already have what we're trying to get as a Reformed community, the Welsh, the American folk hymns, Sacred Harp singers, and especially the Anabaptists, they've been doing this for hundreds of years for fun. That's what they did instead of volleyball or video games, or I don't know what people do today. They get together to have fun, but people don't get together to sing, to have fun. And we could, because it is.
What about a thing by which you had your sections, but then you had kind of a large middle section that was just, hey, and even you set it up as melody is a good thing. We want lots of melody. If you want to sing the melody, come on right here. Does that, I mean...
Well, it's like a Sacred Harp hymn sing. The tenor where the melody is always the biggest section. And it's men and women. And then you got men and women in the alto, and you got men and women in the soprano, and usually just men in the bass. But, yeah. And then when we have a hymn sing in the seminary every year, and almost 100 years now. And I tell the students, if you're not comfortable, sit in the tenor where the melody is. Just sing melody, it's fine. But then they venture out into parts and they pick it up.
Has anyone ever been part of that outside of Sacred Harp? Or, I mean, the Welsh still do it. They still get together for their Gamam and sing uproariously. Half of it's in Welsh though, so it's. I love to sing it, but I don't know what I'm saying. It's good because I like the music.
Yeah, I've been doing psalm sings in my house for 4 or 5 years now. I've never figured out how to translate it into growing our church, maybe because we're about 25 minutes away, but the last psalm sing I did was right before Christmas, and we had 68 people show up.
That's great.
Didn't have any room for them, and they loved it.
In a lot of churches.
Now, part of it helps to have people that know how to do it. So I always make sure I have 2 or 3 families, 4 families from the church that are there to help.
Yeah.
Now, I've been there at times when it's just me and my wife, and then I will have like 4 other families, and it's very awkward. And then we don't even try to sing parts, we just, you know. But yeah, when we have a couple families there that can help lead, people just show up, they're just like, this is awesome. I'm like, hey, you should come to church. I'm like,
Yeah. I think all these things need to be cultivated. We have a mutual friend here named Joffrey Swait, and he's also from Brazil. He's 6'9", quite a towering figure. But he started this practice there in Huntsville, Alabama, called the Beers and Hymns. And it's actually picked up. There's 5 or 6 around the country now. And so they like to drink beer, and he said, hey, come along and join us to sing as well. And so you're cultivating a culture where these things are no longer abnormal. It's just a part of what they do. It's become a fascinating sort of event. And so we have to be the culture establishers. And I think just as an additional note here for a lot of pastors that I meet who say, I just can't sing, I don't know how to do it. They need to find men in their church that can. And in every congregation, even small ones, you'll find somebody who can carry a tune. And make them, in many ways, the exemplars in the church of how it's done. Put more pressure on them. So this is an important function of our church life, and I can't do this, but you have this gift. So let me draft you into this great kingdom project here. And so that's how you begin, but you got to begin to draft these men. Because I know this is the problem with a lot of pastors. They say, I have never had any music training. I don't know what I'm doing. There's always someone in the church who does, and it should be a happy recruitment process.
I want to clarify about the Huntsville thing. I don't know if this came across, but they do it in bars.
That's exactly right, yep.
They aren't having beers in a home, they're going out into public houses. And they get permission from the owners to break out into song at some point in the evening.
Wow.
It's
And,
awesome, yeah.
Yeah, almost invariably they get permission from the owners to sing.
It's like that scene from Moby Dick. Everybody's starting to sing, yeah. There you go. I don't want to get sidetracked on this, but I would be curious if anybody knows biologically the effects of alcohol on the vocal cords. I'm serious, because I like the idea, but do you drink before, during, or after?
Oh, I think,
All
I think
three?
the inhibition.
It's relevant, the answer to the question is yes, and I don't know biologically, but scripturally, we know wine is given to gladden the heart of man. So if the point is to have fun while you're singing,
I think it's more the effect on the ear.
you sound really good.
That's what happens at the Welsh, the Mamadonis. And you talk to a Welshman who's got two questions. Where's my hymnal and where's my drink? That's their primary national identity.
Well, I think the problem is not typically a vocal limitation, it's a psychological one. So if there's an appropriate freeing up of the spirit,
Inhibitions.
inhibitions, I mean, again, to a degree it's not beyond what's appropriate, but I mean, I think there's a loosening there that's probably what helps.
I will say though, that Baptists have a pretty good tradition of singing and we don't drink, so.
Sure, you can have one without the other.
So imagine how great it could be.
Okay, I hope you don't mind if I ask another question, but I was interested because at this point, I kind of disagreed with Michael, and I want to hear, I just thought, man, it would be great to discuss it, but I wasn't going to hijack, obviously, but now I can. And the whole matter of familiar tunes versus unfamiliar, and how much is too much, and we're doing a Psalter right now, and I think it's like 60% familiar tunes, because I've got people who don't sing the Psalms, and it's a brand new text, and they're just going to flip it open as a family. It's nice for them to say, to have a, your loving kindness, Lord, is good and free. It's just really helpful, but I also recognize that, that could be a cop-out, and you should expand your repertoire. And I'd just be curious to hear other people's thoughts on familiar versus new.
I made my case.
Well, I'll tell you how we overcame it, because our entire Psalter was unfamiliar, but it was the only Psalter we had, and that was the important thing. So we had recordings, and familiar is always relative. Familiar compared to what? So if they've heard it a few times, it's not familiar. It's not that hard to overcome.
Was it recordings of the voice or just piano?
It was Michael. Yeah, in fact, the
gotta have
instrumental
words.
is not helpful, in my experience. It's most helpful to have all four parts sung as far as learning music. We've tried just having like a MIDI file playing the piano or something. and
Well, that's painful in other ways too.
It was harder to pick out your part.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't that go back to what they were talking about regarding your hymnal needs to fit your congregation? And if that's what y'all need at this level, perhaps that's fine.
Yeah.
You're working upward.
And stretch them a little bit.
Sure, and
Exactly.
if you're using tunes that would be familiar to me but aren't familiar to your congregation, like the one you just sang, I know that to another set of words, but perhaps your congregation doesn't, and that would be perfectly appropriate to me. I'm just making an argument for, again, the meaning of the music is partly influenced by its familiar associations. If it doesn't have them, go for it. But if it does, why not look for another tune? We've got thousands and thousands and thousands more, and more being made all the time.
I kind of have a both and view of this, because I get this argument and I like it. I mean, sometimes there's just, this is the perfect tune for that text. But so I'm gonna wed that, but if my congregation doesn't know it yet, for a while, we'll sing that text as something they already know until we're ready to learn the new tune. And then, so all the time, even in my own hymnal, if I wanna sing a text and they don't know the tune yet, I'll just wed it to another text they know for this week. We'll do it, and then over time, I want them to learn the text, the tune that I think is actually more suited to this.
Do they? Because that's always the question. Do we do it right the first time? That sounds like an insult, I'm sorry. Because that's the argument I have with the book Psalms for Singing. Sorry, I'm pointing to you, Steve. They're right behind you. They just wanted to get a Psalter out there. They intended to update it, but they never did. And by the time they did, this is so ingrained that their new one's not selling.
Well, in my very limited experience, there are two things that occur to me. One, there's a real precedent in church history for it. I mean, it's very common to say, we had a complete Psalter with 10 or 11 tunes, and did they do just fine? I suppose they did. I mean, the singing in the Massachusetts Bay wasn't particularly great, but that wasn't because of the limited number of tunes. Also saying, well, some tunes are very distinct. They lend themselves to being proper tunes, and they have such a strong association. But we already can recognize some tunes can wear multiple hats. So I don't know. I'm still seeing, and plus, too, the last thing is to say that now when I see a text in the Psalter, I find my mind drawn to a particular tune, and I don't feel an incongruity that there is another text with that tune. I don't feel at that moment a dissonance, a cognitive dissonance. I feel like that text has found a home in a tune that is a vehicle for it that's very sufficient, and I don't know.
My children have found the difficulty in learning in classical education, taking one tune and applying it to, this little noun floating around, and they can mix up 5 different songs and not realize they did it. And I don't think that's healthy. I think being able to hear a tune and the words come, because that's all you've ever heard with that tune, is really powerful. And you can just hear a melody. You can hear instrumental music in the background and find yourself glorifying God and reminding your soul of things you needed to be reminded of. And that can easily interfere when you have 3 different sets of words going through your mind, in my experience.
Preaching. You guys are related.
You guys is there questions out here for them? Things you might want to ask them?
I have one. First, a quick plug for Michael. Our church uses those files those audio files that Donald was just referencing. We send those out in emails once a month if there's something new. Great resource. And I agree. I think there is something. It just it compounds how helpful they are to have the words and the wording sung, as opposed to just instrumental. Instrumental is not nothing, but the wording is just immensely more beneficial, I think, and helpful for our purposes. I wanted to return to something you said, Dan, at the very beginning, where you kind of, from a pastoral perspective, you were talking Turkey in terms of just breaking down sheer numbers. When we think about the musical slots that we have, if we think just spitballing, the average member who comes on Sunday morning will hear 4 or 5 hymns or psalms. So altogether, if you multiply that by 50, we don't have all that many slots. And then if you think about repetition, which of course we want for our good stuff, I would love to hear that described, those sorts of numbers. I realize that's a little bit separate from the how many, how big can a congregational repertoire really be. But just in practical consideration, have you all worked through that, those sort of numbers? And I mean, that really does practically kind of narrow down the number of songs that are somewhat are at your disposal.
Yeah, and I'd like to know too. I'd just like to hear.
My number is 150. I'm not kidding.
No.
You really, that's repeating everything 4 times a year. And that's singing, that's singing 10 hymns a day on the Lord's Day.
On Sunday, 10 hymns.
I think we're just like slightly more, but pretty close, like 180 maybe, I don't know.
So some things are seasonal. You'll sing those, less, and but in reality, now, they can know more, but, practically, that's the number I just kinda, have in my head of our repertoire.
How do people learn more than that then? I remember sitting down, I think it was with you maybe 25 years ago, with a list of what do we call them back then? Praise choruses? And I had a list of 350. And you said, oh, there's no way I know 350 songs. I don't believe it. But when we went down the list, oh yeah, I do know all these. How did I ever learn 350 songs? Like I'm 45 now. I'm sure I know 5,000. Well, how did I learn them? If I only had 150 a year. I don't have an answer to that, but somehow.
I know for me, in my personal experience, when you move from one congregation to another, when you move churches, there might not be a lot of overlap. And so it might be 150, but I mean, I'm only 24 and I've gone to, 4 or 5 different churches at this point in time just by moving so many different times and getting so plugged in. And even if I'm only at a congregation for a year, I might learn 100 new hymns that year because their repertoire is vastly different from the previous congregation I was at. So
But this is also why you have to sing more than just on Sunday.
right.
So I only sing 150 songs in my church, but with my family, I sing every night 2 or 3 hymns. So that's already expanding my number. And then hymn sing in our home 4 or 5 times a year, there's more. So it's just, I'm just talking practically for Sunday.
Yeah.
So, so then you're careful about what you choose, but I'm not saying that's all you should know for sure. You just gotta sing more.
So if you would limit yourself to 150, does that mean you forego trying to learn all 150 psalms, or means you get rid of hymns, or what do you do?
Well, this is where I just practically, I think there's some value, and there are some tunes that are worth singing for more than one text, and so I can sing more text than that.
Okay.
Well, something like Heiferdal, to me, that's not, it's just, it goes with so many things. Like, I'm a really bad at dressing and matching clothes. So my wife helps me by putting very neutral clothes in my closet. Whatever I pull out is pretty much guaranteed to work. It's really true, it's horrible. And there's a good, Kingsfold, Forest Green, Heiferdal, Hamburg, there's maybe about 8 or 9 more. They're just not so distinct to me, like Antioch. Da, 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 da. You can't put that with anything else, but lots of other stuff.
So as a follow-up, let's say, a lot of our churches will use a 3-year election. In terms of memory, would you say, I imagine what some of my parishioners would say, and have said, if I pull one out from 3 years ago, and we, with no warning, we sing that, what is the collective memory, if we're using a 3-year reading schedule? So the Psalms will probably, guys, you can help me on that. The Psalms are probably a little more frequent, most of those. We're hitting most of those more frequently than every 3 years. But if we only sing a song once every 3 years, is that just
So I use 3-year
unfair?
lectionary, but I'm using tunes that I'm repeating tunes.
So you're thinking hit it once a year at least?
A given tune?
Yes, sir.
For sure. Yeah, my tune repertoire is a lot less than my text repertoire.
So to me, it seemed like there are a couple issues here. One, I think you hit on a great point. I don't think there's a reason to be talking in 1-year segments. I don't know why it would. And you're not going to forget it in 5 years. If you want to do a 5-year cycle, you're going to get through all of them. And then the other thing is, we don't want to think of the psalm sings and such things as only training for Sunday morning, and eventually we won't need them, but as an ongoing life of the church thing that is a fixture, and it's going to grow, hopefully. So we're not just picking a hymnal that's good for Sunday morning, we're picking a hymnal and the selections for a hymnal that the whole congregation has under their arm when they go to McDonald's, when they go to work, all the time. It's something they carry around and they sing from, and they should use far more out of church than in church, I would hope.
It also presupposes a certain culture, which I would advocate for. But I mean, we have so many new believers, so many rescues from a local megachurch, so many people coming and going. You know, it's hard to build that. It's a healthy church, but we don't have the culture that I'm seeing here. You know, of just long training.
Yeah, and I'm sure Steve would agree, this didn't happen overnight. It's a long process, and I think, you know, Michael, probably the reason this is so common to you is because you're Michael Owens. This is just part of who you are. You've always been musical. You've been a real blessing to a lot of our congregations. But our people, like I said in my lecture, you guys are light years away from the typical congregant. That's why musicians need to be really close to their people to find out where they are. Light years away. You have to take my word for that. And so you're building them. And so I don't think incrementalism is a cuss word. I think we need to be very diligent in teaching new things. The things we were learning 12 years ago at Providence, we no longer sing them. Not because we've moved beyond them, but because our maturities, we're at a different place in our maturity. So we're singing other things. We're challenging ourselves even more so than we did 12 years ago. So we need to be very cautious in where we are in history, and also, if we're going to imbibe of all our post-millennial happiness, I think we need to have a very long-term vision, 40, 80, 120 years old.
500 years.
500 years, there you go. Of where we will be, where our children already are, which is at least 5 steps ahead of us, certainly ahead of me. I mean, just take just peruse through these buildings here. It's remarkable. And so there's incredible amount of hope, and I think that's how we need to think through music long-term.
I'm going to bring it back one more time to the Anabaptists who have what we want. They did it incrementally. It took them several hundred years, and they're not even post-millennial. What excuse do we have?
Could I get you guys to comment a little bit, Scott, you mentioned it, Yuri's talked about it, Dan, I maybe give you what you've done in your homes with singing, table hymns, how do you do that? Do you do around a piano? Do you have people that have asked you, what have you encouraged your parishioners or other folks? John has been silent in here, he's been in church work before. Maybe we let John or somebody else.
Oh, I'm the least able to answer that question. I'm not very good at that. I wish I had done more with my own family. I do get together with friends, though, occasionally, for dinner or whatever, and we sing before and after dinner, and just break out the hymnals and sing what we can sing from wherever we are. Yeah, it's just adding it into your life, I guess, on a regular basis. That's the thing. But I didn't do enough of it with my own family, I think, growing up.
Peter or anybody else?
Well, yeah, we sing. We sing at dinner. We will, after we pray, we sing the doxology. We've been doing that about a year, I think. And then after dinner, as long as we don't have an evening rehearsal or something, we'll try to get the scriptures and sing. So get out the books. So that's the Bible and the hymnals. And I tend to choose fewer songs for the kids and kind of go-to songs. So "Come Christians Join to Sing" is the song that is most often requested. So I find there's immense benefit in doing things over and over and over again. So yeah, we'll sing. It's nothing fancy. Normally it's unison. We have started singing in parts a little bit. So my son hasn't hit puberty yet. I'm super excited about getting a tenor. That'll be great. But it's usually unison. And but most importantly, I want there to be a masculine quality about it, kind of a stout, kind of a sturdiness, which I really appreciate Yuri's example in that, and just try to encourage that with my kids, make them think it's, like Scott said, make them think it's normal. They don't know otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I would. This is what I encourage the families of the church or other congregations. I would say, talk to the dad or the mom if dad's not available. Ask your pastor what the hymns for Sunday are. Say, oh, but I don't. He doesn't do this until Friday. Well, make him do it on Monday. Have him give out the hymns for the church, whatever's going to be prepared on Monday. And then, sorry, Steve. I've been disinvited from preaching on Sunday, right? On Monday or Tuesday, and then send those out to the congregation early in the week, and That way, we talked a lot about this over the years, but the week is practice for the game. And so we do all our musical training during the week in preparation for that holy day when our voices rise as one. And so in our family, that's what we do. Since Daddy has the privilege of choosing the hymns, on Sunday it will be Psalm 14 from Greg Wilbur, actually. So that's what we sing through the week. We sing it every single day. It's repetitive every day. And on Sunday, even my 2.5-year-old can hum it. And that's pretty cool. That's great. And so, but there's a repetition. We're doing 5 days a week in preparation for whatever the pastor chooses on Sunday. So at least there'll be a level of musical familiarity for all the children. And we do it at least once a day.
Well, I have 11 children, so maybe I should say something.
Yes, please, enlighten us.
I don't do it like I should, but a couple things we've tried to do. Since I'm the musician, everybody looks at it already as, to your point about being the man leading this thing. I'm not the one hanging back. I'm the one saying, all right, guys, everybody come in the living room. And I play guitar. That's what I have. When my oldest son, before he went to college, when he was there, he was phenomenal on the piano. And so that was great to gather around that. But now it's back to the guitar. And it's usually my wife telling me when it's time to stop, put the kids to bed. And that's a regular thing. I put the youngest are twins, put them to bed singing a few songs. Put the girls to bed at a later date singing a couple songs. So it's just throughout the life of it, throughout the day.
Yeah, that's great.
And then, trying to find out earlier in the week what the music for Sunday will be.
Yeah.
Depends on what church you're going to.
Well, I guess I should answer this too, since I'm mine. My family life was unfortunately truncated, so I only have 2 years to call back on. But during those 2 years, I sang for about 15 or 20 minutes to the kids every night as they were in bed, and for another 15 or 20 minutes to the infant, as well as singing around dinner and often having music playing in the background. But then again, I'm Michael Owens. Whatever that means.
I think for us, it was being in a church that was strongly musical. Being in Moscow for 15 years, and the Cantus came out. The first edition of Cantus came out shortly after we got there. I think. What was the year of the first?
2002.
2002. We got out there in '98. We were using the book of Psalms for singing, which we were familiar with a little bit, but started singing more from that, and then the Cantus. And we didn't have family worship every night, but we had family worship several times a week, and I think over the years became more singing heavy than teaching heavy.
Mm-hmm.
I was much more emphasis on teaching in the younger years with my kids, and then more singing later on.
Yeah, we try to mix both. I send out hymns for the service every Monday, so we encourage our families to do that, and we'll sing those, and then we just start at the beginning of the hymnal, sing 2 or 3 a night, work our way through. So we just keep going through. That's awesome. That also, gives the breadth. And then every night before bed, we sing "All Praise Thee, My God, This Night" with Talis Canon, and break out in the canon on the doxology at the end. We've done that since my 13-year-old was an infant, so this was part of the fabric of family life.
Great.
And then with parts, so I've got 13, 11, and then 4 and 2. The 2 older kids, I never taught them how to read singing parts, but they play strings and they can read music. So a couple years ago, they just started those singing parts on their own. So
Wow.
just kind of happens naturally if it's just part of the life of the home. That's pretty cool.
Regarding parts, I'm like the red-headed guy that, what's your name?
Your favorite son-in-law?
Oh, yeah. Would you care to comment on singing parts, which keeps coming back up, as well as, rearing the culture in their kids with that as far as Kodai is concerned, or are you talking to the choir?
Well, I'm probably talking to the choir. I would just say give thanks and sing in unison, and parts are a growth an overflow of maturity, but it shouldn't be the thing we grasp at first as a measure of success or if we're doing it right. I think there's a temptation in CREC churches, and probably others too, to say, we're not doing this well if we're not singing in parts. I don't think that should not be the baseline.
Sure.
I think it should be sing joyfully, even if it's unison. And some pieces we don't need to sing in parts. Some of the Gudamel harmonizations of the Psalms, it's hard to sing in parts. It may not be good voice leading.
And sometimes it
Sing in unison.
slows the music quite a bit.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, but I think I understand when people say we need to sing in parts, because I think what they're meaning is we want to do this well, and that seems like that would be a measure of us doing it well. Just like the mom who says, I need to get my kids in music, the 3-year-old in piano. Well, that 3-year-old can't sit still. That's what I hear the mom saying is, I want them to be musical. It's well intended, but I just say, wait a few years, send them to this or send them to that. And sing at home, right?
Very much so.
So I say sing parts if you can for your church, and I know others of y'all have said that too. And I think what I would love to see, it seems like sing metrical psalms at first, or chant if you can do it. And I would love somebody one day to chart, is there a logical progression? Is one of these forms better for, or new to psalmody than others? Is metrical psalms or hymns on the psalms, are those the early things we go to?
I would say surely, they surely must be. It's the most accessible, and even when Isaac Watts in his preface to Divine and Moral Songs for Children, talking about, and I would commend that to you as well, you want a great read. It's very short. And that's what has I Sing the Mighty Power of God was in Divine and Moral Songs for Children. And he makes reference to music as a memory device because the like sounds and like number of syllables, and makes such a big deal out of the grouping over time as you flow through it, and how helpful it is. I would say unequivocally, and that's not because I prefer that style. I just think it's the most accessible. So I might be wrong. It's just the language I know.
We have maybe time for one more question. Anybody else have a burning question that you feel like you can't leave here without being answered?
I have a question, Jared. I think we sounded really good this week, and I think we ought to challenge the kids to a slam.
A psalm slam.
A psalm slam. Yeah. Can you communicate the challenge?
I think we can arrange that. Yeah, if you're sticking around tomorrow, the camp finishes in the regular time. There's a like a recital in the mid-morning if you don't have to get out of town, and the concert on Saturday, which you can watch online. But maybe those of you who want to stick around, we can psalm slam.
Scheduling around Yuri's availability.
We got through the whole psalm tap without having an argument about chanting. Can you believe it?
All right, y'all. Well, let's. Why don't we slam a little bit of something doxology, or what? Is there something we can sing without hymnals? That Glory Patri? Say again. Glory Patri. Glory Patri, and which one?
You're asking for suggestions.
134.
The independent Baptists are getting all shifty.
Yeah, but which? Do you mean the?
Yeah, that sounds good.